Welcome back to the AI Daily Brief. Today, we return to the realm of enterprise AI deployments, specifically how agents are finding their way beyond pilots, beyond experimentation, and into production. KPMG has just released their latest quarterly pulse survey, and these are a very useful longitudinal way to track how attitudes and execution around AI and agents has proceeded among big companies. The survey captures the perspective of over 130 C-suite and business leaders for companies with over $1 billion in revenue across the US. In other words, this is a study of some of the largest companies. Now, we have been tracking this for over a year now. And going back to the beginning of 2024, the story was very different than it is now. In those early surveys, there was a recognition that AI investment is necessary, but companies were theoretically hung up on things like ROI, or more specifically, not even knowing how to measure ROI. Between Q4 24 and Q1 25, though, the story became very different. There was a continual increase in the anticipated spend on Gen AI, but more than that, the last Pulse survey showed that the tools that we were paying attention to in early 2024 had become totally commonplace by the beginning of 2025. Between Q4 24 and Q1 25, the percentage of workers using knowledge assistants on a daily basis, so think ChatGPT, jumped from 22 to 58%. In other words, the assistant era of AI had become something of a table stakes. The big story then was enterprises were very clearly moving into agent land. The percentage of organizations that were piloting agents almost doubled between Q4 and Q1, from 37% all the way up to 65%. In other words, fully 2/3 of organizations were piloting AI agents in the beginning of this year. What's more, basically everyone was planning on deploying AI agents, even if they weren't piloting them yet. 99% said that they were planning to deploy AI agents, and as I've joked previously, I think that means 1% weren't reading the survey correctly. So what is the story this time around? And in short, it's that agents are moving out of the pilot stage and into production. Now, at first glance, you might notice that the percentage of organizations that were piloting agents was down from 65 to just 57%. The percentage of organizations exploring the possibility of using agents was down from 25 down to 10%. But the story is not about a decrease in agentic interest. It's about the fact that we were moving to actual deployment. Agent deployments tripled between Q1 and Q2 among these big enterprises, from about 1/10 of organizations having full deployments of agents to a full third. Another way that KPMG put it was that 90% of organizations are now past the experimentation stage. What's more, there were some interesting findings around what people were using agents for. When KPMG asked how much you were focused on efficiency and productivity versus revenue growth as it relates to their AI agent strategies, 36%, a little over 1/3, said that they were mostly focused on efficiency, with some exploration of new revenue opportunities. 18% said that they were mostly focused on new revenue opportunities with some efficiency prioritization. Literally no one said that they were focused entirely on either operational efficiency and cost reduction, or on the other end of the spectrum, entirely focused on creating new markets and revenue streams. And in fact, the biggest slice of these enterprises, nearly half at 46%, were equally focused on efficiency and revenue growth. Now, this is, of course, super interesting to me as someone who talks a lot about the difference between efficiency and opportunity AI. At least from an intent perspective, it seems like most organizations are at least a little bit paying attention to both. A couple other interesting notes, statements that leaders agreed with about agents over the next 12 months. 87% agreed that agents would prompt organizations to upskill employees in roles that will be displaced. In other words, they anticipate that agents will take over some big chunks of work that will require employees to be upskilled to do other things. 87% agree that agents will redefine performance metrics. 86% believe that agents will enhance job satisfaction by helping manage workloads. And right now, it's worth noting that every survey that comes out, and one can be skeptical of this reasonably, but it is very consistent, shows employers viewing agents as something that makes the work experience better for their people, not just a tool to ruthlessly cut headcount. Maybe the most interesting statement that leaders agreed with was 82% of leaders agreed that in the next 12 months, AI agents will become valued teammates and contributors. This really puts a fine point on that idea that we are moving out of the exclusively assistant AI stage and even the agent pilot stage into something where leaders are anticipating full digital workers collaborating with their people. Commensurately, as agents become more ubiquitous, data has gone up as a concern. Both data privacy concerns and quality of organization data concerns have increased over the last couple of quarters. When it comes to barriers to agent deployment, A lot of them have to do with employees. 39% viewed systems complexity as one of the major challenges, but 47% of those surveyed thought that their workforces were resistant to change, and 59% said that they had technical skills gaps. And given that I've lamented in the past how out of sync most educational resources are with agents, it was interesting to see what strategies they were deploying for exactly that purpose. 69% still are teaching prompt skills to maximize agent effectiveness, but you also see some more interesting and creative things. 49% said that they're creating agent-specific sandbox environments where employees can practice. 41% said that they're implementing some sort of AI agent shadowing programs where employees observe experts who are working with agents. And 39% said that they're developing role-specific guidelines for effective agent collaboration. Overall, one of the most interesting big banner headline was that 82% of those surveyed agreed that because of AI in the next 24 months, their industry's competitive landscape would look different. I think that that means everything from the potential for new business models, new vectors of competition, to new winners and losers in their sector. The story is very clearly things changing fast, and agents being at the very heart of it. Steve Chase, Vice Chair of AI and Digital Innovation at KPMG, said, "The data shows just how quickly AI agents are moving out of pilots and into production, and that momentum will only accelerate. What makes this moment unique is that leaders increasingly see agents not just as a way to cut costs, but as a way to rethink growth and create new value." Todd Lohr, the head of ecosystems at KPMG, commented, "Our clients are no longer asking if AI will transform their business, they're asking how fast it can be deployed. This isn't just about technology adoption. It's about fundamental business transformation that requires reimagining how work gets done and how it is measured." Now, on that front, one example of an organization going through an AI transformation came from Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff this week. In a recent interview, he claimed that AI is doing 30 to 50% of the work at Salesforce now, referring to roles including software engineering and customer service. Now, of course, we've heard a number of different tech companies claim that AI is now writing 30% or more of their code, but this is the first time that a Fortune 500 company has framed it as AI doing a substantial portion of the work overall. Benioff says that his company's customer service agents have reached 93% accuracy, giving them the ability to take over entire roles. Benioff said, "All of us have to get our head around this idea that AI can do things that before we were doing. We can move on to higher value work." Now, some discussion on X or Twitter suggested that this was an indication of how many people were likely to be displaced, but I think AI creator Matthew Berman had the right of it when he wrote, "Who really thinks Salesforce is going to choose to be stagnant and profit maximize versus expanding the universe of problems they solve and increase total addressable market?" And I think that this is exactly the case for optimism. Yes, some companies will be rewarded in the short term for cutting costs for the same amount of output, but eventually they're going to be outcompeted by the organizations that reinvest those cost savings and efficiency gains in new models, new opportunities, and just better products and services. Which is not to say that there aren't some serious challenges that remain as we move out of the pilot stage and into the full deployment stage of agents. Speaking at the VentureBeat Transform conference this week, writer CEO May Habib noted some of the challenges that come as agents start to hit scale. She said, "Agents don't reliably follow rules. They're outcome-driven, they interpret, they adapt, and the behavior really only emerges in real-world environments." She said that companies are having issues adjusting to non-deterministic agents. And this is something that we absolutely have seen even in our own experience at Superintelligent. For one type of our core agent readiness audit, we really have to constrain what the agent does. Because we are scoring the answers, we want them to be asked in a particular way and in a particular sequence. And so we basically have to really constrain the voice agent and how it interacts. You can tell that what it wants to do is interact with what's being said, to jump around the different questions, ask more sub-questions, and basically have more freedom to explore and try to get to the same result. Now, with some of our other types of audits that don't have that scoring system, we allow it more freedom, and you can tell it's a more natural pattern for that agent. But of course, enterprises are going to face similar challenges where they have some things that they just need agents to do in a very prescriptive, rote sort of way, and yet it also remains likely that we will discover even more opportunities if we can put agents in the context where they do have a little bit more freedom to flex. In any case, the story is exactly as the KPMG press release sums up. AI agents are moving beyond experimentation, and leaders are preparing for competitive transformation. For now, that's going to do it for today's AI Daily Brief. Appreciate you listening or watching as always, and until next time, peace.